Good morning. It's the 27th of April, Friday. Very, very beautiful Friday morning. Spring has finally sprung. And today we talk about films, music, books, and art. We shift a little gear to one of our main topics, which is books. Today is all about books. It's films, music, books, and art, but today is all about books. We have a book author in the show. And of all the books that we are going to kick off here at the Friday's Film, Music, Books, and Art podcast, we are going to kick it off with a children's book written and illustrated by Daniel Beitchman. This book is very educational but also very fun, silly in a sense, but it teaches a lot of lesson. Writing for kids, you need to really get their attention, and being silly is one of them. Having fun in reading is key to get kids interested in reading, interested in exploring, and interested in learning. Boy versus Fly, what could possibly go wrong? A little comedic, a little silly, a lot of fun, and a lot of life lessons. Very fun book for kids. Boy versus Fly, a Dream Bean adventure. With the best of intentions, Dean Bean disrupts his math class chasing a fly. He knows he made a mistake and accepts the consequences of his impulsive behavior. In making amends, he never imagined that he could learn an important lesson from a bug. Daniel Beitchman lives in Toronto, Canada. He has a bachelor's degree in the history from the University of Western Ontario in London, Ontario, and studied art and design at George Brown College in Toronto. He is married and a stepfather, grandfather, brother, and uncle. Boy vs. Fly, a Dean Bean adventure is the first published work of Daniel. It was inspired by some of his own experiences and love of finding humor in everyday life. As for Dean Bean, he's ready for another adventure. Visit www.danielbeachman.com. Boy vs. Fly, a Dean Bean adventure, received a 5-star review from Jen at goodreads.com. Jan at goodreads.com said, "This was my 5,000th book owned. It's special in so many ways, and I went to get my autographed copy this morning, and as it is a children's book, it was a very quick read. But I found myself smiling at the short tale. The boys would rather figure out how to catch a fly in hand on their own than even half their salad and learn from their own to eat even half of their salad and learn from their father. Typical kids. The illustrations are great too. There are a lot of geometrical shapes involved, which would make a great teaching tool. 2 thumbs up to Dean Bean and his author Daniel." You can catch Dean Bean and his author Daniel Beitchman at the Mississauga Chapters Vega for book signing tomorrow, April 28th at 11 a.m. Tomorrow in Mississauga Chapters Vega, meet Dean Bean and meet his author Daniel Beitchman. There's also a book launch / comedy night at the Social Capital Theatre in Toronto. It's going to be a great night of comedy, May 29th, 8 p.m., 183 Danforth Avenue, Social Capital. It's going to be a book signing / comedy night because Daniel Beitchman is also a student of Second City Improv. Thank you very much for joining us today. And now we get to our interview with Mr. Daniel Beitchman, the author of Boy versus fly. What could possibly go wrong? A Dean Bean adventure.
Thank you for joining me here. Daniel, what's your last name?
Beitchman.
Daniel Beitchman in the house. Thank you for joining me here today.
Joey, my pleasure. It's great to be here.
It's been a long time coming. I've been looking forward to meet you in person, and now we're here.
Yes, I've been looking forward to this as well. No, I was going to say, your invitation was welcomed, and I was excited to come and meet you. I listened to a few of your podcasts, and I was like, all right, this sounds cool.
Thank you very much. You're the second person who wrote a book that I'll be interviewing for the podcast. The other one is actually for TV, but his audio is going to make it to the podcast as well. But how is that like to write a book? Is that this is your first book, right?
Yes, this is my first book, and it's been an amazing experience that it just keeps getting better. It keeps getting better and better, really. From the idea of, that kind of creative spark where, okay, I have a story idea, and then seeing it all come together, from the creation of the story and the storyline. And then, I also illustrated this book. So creating the character and the family and the settings of, where the book is also, part of the fun. And then the journey working with the public, I self-published, but I still worked with an editor, and that experience of having someone review the story and making suggestions and kind of making the corrections, and then getting into production, producing the book and distributing it digitally, and then getting into the stores and promoting it on social media and doing events like this podcast. And I just I'm planning a book launch party. So it's great. It's really been, I recommend it for anybody.
That's awesome. When I saw some of your social media posting that you are a book writer, number one, and number two, you wrote a book for kids. It just hit so many bells in my mind because, first of all, so I have a daily podcast. You hit maybe three of those subjects that I am honing in. So number one, my business podcast, there's something that you're touching on that side. And then writing a book, the creative part, I have a Friday podcast. It's called Films, Books, Music, and Art. And my Saturday podcast is about family and kids.
Okay.
So I just know when I saw that you were posting something about your book, I just saw, okay, I really need to talk to Mr. Daniel here because he can be in any of these three podcasts. So thank you for coming. I don't know which day will I be posting this, but let's go back. Maybe we'll start with the kid part. Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself now? We will talk about the book and your brand, but I want to know you a little better. I want our viewers and our listeners to know you a little better. Why don't we go back, since you wrote a children's book, let's go back, get to know you a little better. Let's start from your childhood.
Okay. Well, as much like the character, the main character of this book is Dean Bean, and the DB, the Dean Bean's initials, and those are also my initials, which is no coincidence. So when I was a kid, and Dean Bean in the story is 7 years old, and I probably say when I was 7 years old, it was probably very similar to him, a little bit rambunctious, independent. One of the things my parents, they always kind of allowed me to kind of figure things out myself, and they gave me that freedom to explore and play, which is really, looking back on it now, is so lucky. And I grew up in the suburbs of Ottawa, and that was a lot of exploring in the kind of the fields and the ravines near my house and playing with friends, whatever. But really what inspired this story was when I was a little boy, about 7, I used to have a workshop in my parents' garage, and they bought me a little toolkit anyway. So I was trying to kill a fly with a wooden mallet and, wooden mallet and fly just, anyway. So that was kind of what inspired the trickery of this book, or the humor, is that, you got to choose your fly catching instruments carefully.
Have you always liked children's book yourself as a child, or have you always thought you want to be a storyteller yourself and be a book writer yourself when you grow up?
It wasn't necessarily that I wanted to write a book. When I was a kid, books were encouraged. My family was really into reading and going to bookstores and all that. And I liked that journey, but I think it was probably I was always a hesitant reader, not because I didn't like it. I don't really know the reasons, but I never really dreamed per se of being a writer, but what I always dreamed about was creativity and ideas and putting something together, whether it's, I dreamed of, writing a screenplay or what a movie could be, or, even business ideas or a product or just something I like to keep busy and creating something. And here I was, really lucky to be able to create this book and see it through to completion.
And I remember you told me that you're the one who illustrated this book. So for our camera, can you hold it up for a second? And let's not forget to turn on our... Well, this is Guerrilla Podcast, right? So all good. We'll capture a lot of those off the camera. Everything is on camera. So yeah, so you illustrated this as well, and I can see it's very, very kid-friendly illustration.
Yes.
And just looking through it, if I was a kid, really, kids always get attracted first in the illustration, I would think, right? So is there a science or an art behind writing a kid's book?
Well, I'm still learning a lot about this book as it just came out in January, so I'm just really getting into stores now and delivering it to kids and I've been doing story time readings at different stores. I've been invited to a couple of schools to do a reading. So I'm just getting that experience with kids to it. But what I'm finding is definitely they react to the colors and the graphics, and it's really catching people's attention. So, it was more creative and passion than scientific and, analytical decisions. But I really felt that, the color palette and I tried to keep the design and the illustrations simple so they could, tell a story in themselves, but be visually appealing and colorful. And so it really kind of adds to the, I think, attraction of the story.
Well, as you mentioned that, and I think a lot of book authors, the characters and the storyline, some of them are references of from their own experience, right? From your own childhood. Can you give us an example, maybe a snippet in the story that kind of are parallel to your...
Well, I don't... There's definitely parallels here in my life. I think that... I was kind of an active kid, so I loved, mowing the lawn, and I loved doing things around the house, helping out. I wouldn't say I did the dishes or laundry or clean the bathroom or anything like that. But as a kid, I wanted to get involved at helping the garden or, help with the barbecue, whatever it is. But I think there's that parallel in Dean Bean. But I think one of the similarities in terms of kind of creative inspiration for the character and some of the character attributes is just kind of through my improv experience, which I started taking improv at Second City about 2 years ago. And then that just, I fell in love with improv and the community. And that really kind of helped inspire this journey of creating the book and, pursuing that passion for creativity.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have Daniel Beitchman. Did I pronounce that correct?
Got it.
Beitchman. Yeah. Daniel Beitchman written and illustrated the book Boy vs. Fly. Don't go away. When we come back, we will continue and talk about the book itself and maybe a little synopsis on the story. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today on our Friday podcast, Films, Music, Books, and Art. I wish you all a great weekend this weekend. It's going to be a sunny, nice weather. We are taking a little break from our weekend podcast, Saturday and Sunday. We are collecting data and research so that we can do a lot of pre-production. When we come back, we will come back with a bang for the weekend podcast. So in about 2 weekends, you won't hear anything from us because we will do a pre-production and a production to bank some episodes for you. And we will see you in about 2 weeks for the weekend podcast. Meanwhile, when you enjoy this weekend, when you come back on Monday, we will be ready again for you for Monday Finance, Business, and Entrepreneur podcast. Every Monday, only here at It's Just Another Ordinary Joe Show, 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, and 9 a.m. Pacific. We'll see you there, and we'll talk about business, finance, and entrepreneur Mondays. Now back to our regular programming.
Welcome back to the Ordinary Joe Show. Today, we are... seriously, I don't know where to put this still. Are we on the Saturday podcast or are we on the Friday podcast? Let's say we're on the Saturday podcast about family and kids, because I am passionate about kids too. I have a 6-year-old, and I had a very good experience trying to teach her how to read. So tell us a little bit about the synopsis of this book, Daniel.
Well, the story is about the main character is Dean Bean, and he's trying to learn how to catch a fly like his dad does. And, he's not very good at it. And he's also an impulsive kid. So actually during math class, he notices a fly and he tries to catch it during math class. And, things just don't go well for him. And he ends up disturbing his class and getting in some trouble. So from that, he has to make up for his mistake, and in making up for his mistake, he ends up learning an important life lesson. So all comes from chasing that fly.
That's awesome. A lot of parents nowadays, if they have a problem with the child that they want to solve, finding the right kind of book sometimes is a big tool, right? So, for example, my wife was having problem with my daughter's that when she comes home from school, the bath time, the dinner time, and all that. And then she saw this toy. It's actually a toy about responsibility charts. So toys and books like that, sometimes those are good tools for solving a problem with your child. For your particular book, can you see a certain kind of situation where a child has a problem with something that a parent who's watching or listening to our podcast today, it might click in their mind, this is a situation that I can use Boy versus Fly as a book to help my kid solve a certain situation?
Well, that's a great question. And I think the biggest thing is that, Dean Bean has the right intentions in catching the fly. His timing is off to, disturb his math class, but his intention is to make sure that the class is not disturbed. And, he makes a mistake. And I think the best part about making that mistake is that he owns up to it. So he admits that he made the mistake. He accepts the consequences of his behavior, and he truly is committed to making up for it and sincere with his actions and genuinely, appreciative that his parents understood the mistake. And even though he has to be, I don't like using the word punished, but there are consequences of, his misbehavior, that, I'll just say the word cool about it. And they give him the chance to make up for it in his own way. And they allow him to grow from it rather than penalize him for him and make him, hold him back because of it.
So, if you can put it in one or two words, what's the biggest moral lesson that the kids would be getting from the story?
Well, the biggest thing is you gotta own your mistakes. You really, if we all make mistakes, that's part of being human. But I think that the biggest, character trait that he has is that yes, he did it, and he was an impulsive kid, so I think that got the best of him and something he needs to work on, but he's genuinely sorry and he's going to make up for it.
Awesome. Let's fast forward to the present day, Daniel, 2018. And when did you write the book?
So I started it probably kind of mid-January of 2017.
Tell us a little bit about the process. What did you go through to finally, conceptualize and then illustrate and then now print and publish?
Yeah, so I had this idea for just a story about a boy chasing a fly and kind of getting in trouble. What I did is I just started creating characters based on some of the funny people, or not for some of the funny people I know. And so I started working on the book. I started working on the illustrations and figuring out how I'm going to tell this story. Initially, I thought it would actually be a play. And then I met another children's book author, and I thought this was a great concept. He had self-published, and he was very successful with his book and had a really great experience with it. So I really kind of set my sights on finding out everything about self-publishing, and I set on this journey of creating a book. And I found this free online software for doing graphic design. And I started playing around with what the characters can look like, what their world would look like, what their house looks like, their schoolroom. And then as the story started to come together and I created the characters, I decided that, I'm going to go ahead and publish this book. I got Adobe Illustrator and I started redesigning all of the artwork, kind of making it ready for print publication, and then working with an editor to develop the story and fix the grammar, and continue to work on the illustrations. And it initially came out in November, and then I had to make a few adjustments to publishing, and then it's finally been released in its current format in January.
Why not have it both ways? Could it also be? Could it be a book at the same time a play?
Oh, I would love to see it brought to life with as a play. I think that was the initial dream of this story, was to make it a play, and I would absolutely love to do that. And someday that would be fantastic to see.
So, if it's in a play format, would it be a play for children as audience for the play?
Oh yeah, it's a children's oriented story, and what I've created, I plan to make it into a series called, the subtitle is A Dean Bean Adventure, and so it would be another Dean Bean adventure, and it would be a play in that genre.
Well, the play, the theater Annie, right, which was also a movie piece. It's in Toronto now. My wife is actually interested to see, and we found out the ticket is like 100 plus per person. But you know how a lot of them plays are, although it's a children's story, my wife was the one who's interested. Yeah. Really, so there's sort of like a science and an art behind how to make it appealing to parents too. Right. So if you have a play, is it something that parents would be interested to?
Well, we were all kids at some point. Many people have kids. So, and then, there's a teacher, there's a principal, there's, other characters involved. So I think it's a story that appeals to really people of all ages. I get asked, I've been doing all these in-store events, and people are asking me, what age group are these kids for? And it's a little bit tricky because there's kids at all different ages that are different reading levels. And then there's adults that, like kids' stories. And, so it's just, I think of it as a funny story, and hopefully it's, people find it charming, and that I think is a good story that appeals to anybody at any age.
Well, when I look at it a little bit, I know my daughter would love to read something like this because it's her level, but I think a lot of her classmates, she's in grade 1. So I would think, would you say maybe grade 2, grade 3, start around that to appreciate more of it's a little bit lengthy, right?
Yeah, I get different feedback from bookstores that, there are kids that are, just starting to read and they want a little bit more meat on the bone. They want a little bit longer of a book. It's about 1,900 words, so I wouldn't say it's extensive, but it's probably, I think, 5 would be the earliest level of reading that they would start at.
5 years old?
5 years old, yes.
Well, also, it's a Canadian tradition that parents read to their kids, right? So it could be any age, like you said, because even as babies, if the parents are, and I think that should be encouraged more and more now for the parents to read to their kids at bedtime. And for my experience, reading to my little girl actually helped her to read herself, because I might read a sentence and leave the last word out for her to read, right? So what do you think about that?
Audience involvement. Yeah, no, I think that's part of writing the book, is that, I kind of thought of it as a read to me book where, you're making the buzz noise of the fly and just kind of the different character voices and, just the story arc. I just thought it would be a nice read to me story. So, and getting your kid involved is fantastic, having some of those words to read, and that's, I think that's the way to go.
Can we talk a little bit about the business side of writing a book? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
So a lot of our audience that we are targeting, our listeners and our subscribers are our target market is the ordinary Joe, the ordinary Jane, who are most of our fellow ordinary people are 9 to 5, but I think there's a lot of dream now for 9 to 5ers because we have the internet, we have Shopify, we have a lot of our 9 to 5ers. They want to do a little bit more to create themselves and not just do the routine of the treadmill. So there's a trend now of building your own brand especially among the millennials, and it's a process, right? It's a process. You mentioned to me that this is your first book that you wrote.
Yes, first book.
And how much confidence and guts and I'm trying to find the right word. What do you need to make the final push to actually do something? Because a lot of people dream of doing something, but you actually did it. You actually wrote a book and published.
Yeah, there's a good Yiddish word called chutzpah.
Chutzpah,
yeah. It's definitely, it's just about now where I'm starting to get over those doubts about, is this good? Is this worthwhile? But it started in steps. I had the idea for a story, and I've had lots of ideas for stories that never went anywhere. I just kind of started as a creative exercise, really. But in this, I had this vision for it, and it just kept growing. And as I started working on it more and more, so I believed in it. And then, I'd show it to family and some friends, and, I'd get a laugh or a reaction out of it. And it just seemed to kind of grow into a life of itself. And it just became something that I couldn't put down. And then when I created the character of Dean Bean, it just kind of became this real thing to me, and it just, I was so excited to show it to anybody. I was walking around showing the illustration on my phone to anybody that I could show it to, and it became a very exciting process, and nerve-wracking for sure, and are we crazy writing a story about a fly? And I remember one day I was just kind of at home. I don't know if it was a sick day or whatever, but I was watching the TV show Breaking Bad, and there's an episode of Breaking Bad where they're in their laboratory, and there's a fly in the lab. And Walter White,
I think I remember this.
Walter White is obsessed with catching this fly, and I saw that, and I'm like, okay, this is a go. This is so, on the right track, and
almost like a Three Stooges.
Yeah, exactly. It's become slapstick, and these flies are they're just a simple little fly, but it's a complex little creature, and he's protecting itself, and they can fly, and they can pretty agile, and you're kind of a cumbersome human being that's clumsy and whatever, and what are you going to catch it with? And anyway, so it's ripe for comedy.
Awesome. Chutzpah, the first time I heard of that term, so you're Jewish, I would think. My assistant director on the television version of the Ordinary Joe show, he told me about chutzpah. And it's timely because I was writing an editorial piece for video about grit. Right. And there's a professor in the US who talked about grit, and it's a long piece. It's a 5-minute piece, but there's a lot of those that are talented college grads, right? They're working on decent jobs, but they know they want more, and sometimes that's the key, right? The chutzpah or grit to jump and do something, right? The barrier or the road bump for a lot of people is they think of, what would it cost me, right? What is the cost behind? So there's, the physical monetary cost, there's the time cost, there's the energy. Before you answer that, we'll take 2-minute break. But when we come back, ladies and gentlemen, we'll ask Daniel about what cost is it for somebody who wants to jump that gun, to actually do it. Is it only the chutzpah? I think there's some monetary cost as well. When we come back, we'll talk about this. Please don't go away.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today on our Friday podcast, Films, Music, Books, and Art. I wish you all a great weekend this weekend. It's going to be a sunny, nice weather. We are taking a little break from our weekend podcast, Saturday and Sunday. We are collecting We are collecting data and research so that we can do a lot of pre-production. When we come back, we will come back with a bang for the weekend podcast. So in about 2 weekends, you won't hear anything from us because we will do a pre-production and a production to bank some episodes for you. And we will see you in about 2 weeks for the weekend podcast. Meanwhile, when you enjoy this weekend, when you come back on Monday, we will be ready again for you for Monday Finance, Business, and Entrepreneur podcast. Every Monday, only here at It's Just Another Ordinary Joe Show, 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, and 9 a.m. Pacific. We'll see you there, and we'll talk about business, finance, and entrepreneur Mondays. Now back to our regular programming.
Welcome back to the Ordinary Joe Show Saturday podcast, or maybe Friday too. This can also fit on our Friday podcast, but we have here Daniel Beitchman, book author of Boy vs. Fly. Join us here today at the studio. It was such a pleasure to finally meet you and finally see the book. I will find the chance to read this book, and because I have a 6-year-old, I'm pretty sure she'll be interested to see this. We were talking about, before the break, the barrier or the road bump. Is that the right word? Or the roadblock for many? Yeah, the roadblock for many aspiring young person or 9-to-5er who wants to create a brand for themselves or create something, creative for themselves, is one of the biggest questions is cost. What would it cost me to create something? What would it cost me to build my brand? What would it cost me to write a song and publish it on Spotify or SoundCloud? What would it cost me to write a book? Was that ever been a hindrance or a concern for you before you move forward?
Well, cost considerations are definitely, part of what you need to look at going with this. But, from learning what I know now to what I started, there's so many options for people and it's so accessible. I really believe that, with the knowledge I have now, I could have done this book for a third of the cost. The time commitment, there was so much learning involved and, the amount of hours involved in, the creation of the book and then just the production of the book and then now promoting the book. It's all... I can't even count the amount of hours, but it's all part of it. But it really became something that, could I not do this? There was just this driving force that this had to be done, and I would have found a way to do it. The costs are not that prohibitive, but I would have found a way to get this done, even if it had taken me longer. It was something that I had to get out of me. I had to share this story with the world.
Sorry to interrupt this program, my friends, but we're running out of time for this episode. We try our best to squeeze in as many information as we can for the 33 minutes that we are allotted for. But we are going to divide this episode into 2 parts. So part 1 today, but the rest of the interview with Daniel Beitchman is about the business side of writing a book, and he shared so many beautiful insights, a lot of practical information. If you are someone who's aspiring to be a book author, a writer of novels, fiction, or even children's book, just like Daniel, I will really urge you to come back and check out this the part 2 of this episode next week on Friday, only here on Ordinary Joe Show. Film, books, music, and arts, Fridays, 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, and 9 a.m. Pacific. See you then. God bless you all. Take care.